It
Okay.
is sunny
It
and
is.
37 degrees.
37. I hate to tell you all this. It's 80 and sunny here.
Oh, it's
So
37 and sunny, and we're happy for the sun.
all right. We're gonna try to do this as open and possible as we can get. I'm not gonna be able to keep up with the chat too much, but I have enough time at the end to answer questions. So if I don't get right to your question right when it comes up, please be patient with me and everything as we go through this format. I know we all prefer that live contact and everything, but there's a lot of content here. I need to let you know that this is normally like a 40-hour class. And I'm going to get not the highlights, but hit some of the important points as we go through here, and hopefully pass on some information that can help you with your future investigations. This is not, though, my history is with law enforcement. This is not technically a law enforcement class. This is a class that's set up for everybody needs to understand. I'm big on working your MDT, your multidisciplinary team, coordinating with your CACs, working with your medical. In fact, you are so fortunate there in Idaho to have a good friend of mine, Matt Cox, who was working here for many years with us and everything. And so some of this stuff you may see when I go over parts of the medical, I did steal from him with his permission, but it's hopefully done in a way. I'm not a medical person, but we need to understand these when we're dealing with child deaths and certain things to look for in this. Now I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So I'm going to go to share screen, share my computer sound and optimize. And there we are. All right. So you should be able to see, are you seeing my the initial response and investigation of child death?
Yeah.
All right, good. When I did that, I lost all of y'all. And please forgive me some of my colloquialisms that I use around here. So I use a lot of y'all and all y'all. So we get it going on this. And we'll go through this, and it's a preview discussion. Let's talk about societal perceptions. This is something we have to go over quite a bit in understanding what we're seeing on this. We've always got to take in those societal perceptions because we've always got to be dealing with the juries. Who's coming up? Who's the ultimate person we're doing this investigation to show what happened? Now, remember, all these cases are not for us. They're not our investigations. These are investigations we're doing for the dead or deceased child. So we have to work our best to get all these answers and understanding of what's going on. And one of the first things we got to do is when it goes to trial, who's going to be seeing it? And so we have the societal perception of, it doesn't take much to injure a kid. We have almost desensitized society and understanding when we talk about, don't ever shake a kid. We don't get to the point of just tossing your kid up in the air or moving around, swinging him around doesn't hurt the kid. It's when you see shaken baby or inflicted head trauma or whatever term they're wanting to call it today, it is such a serious crime that if you saw it happening, you would run up and tackle the person because it's an act of murder you're witnessing. So somebody playing with their kid, and I know most of us, I know I'm guilty of it, tossing the kid in the air, spinning around, holding their arms and everything. That kind of activity is not normally going to cause serious injuries to a child. So we've got to get past that and let society know how violent these actions can be. Not visible injuries. And we stick with the theme of shaken baby or inflicted head trauma. And 85% of them will not have visible injuries. They happen so quick, the body's shutting down so quick, bruising and stuff like that does not have a chance to show up. So we have to understand how the body works, how it goes in, and a lot of these injuries are inside the skull, where the brain has been jarred and pushed and destroyed by the shaking and everything. But the injury on the outside just isn't visible for us. And that's, goes hard, makes it hard for our investigation. sometimes makes us behind in our investigation because we don't realize how serious it is until it gets to a pediatrician or a hospital, especially a child abuse certified pediatrician that looks for those signs. Then the next question comes up, who would do this to a child? We all think normally our everyday normal father mother unit are not going to injure a child, and in most cases that's true. But when we do have these children that are injured, 65 to 85% of them, according to which study you want to look at the time, 65 to 85% of them happen in their own home, usually by their own parents, step parent, mom's new boyfriend, somebody else that's living there, but it's somebody there that should be taking care of this child, loving for them and caring for them, that do this to the child. And the last thing, question we get is why? Why would anybody do this to a child? And understanding, the number one cause that children get injured on, especially at a young age, is crime. And this goes back into society not preparing families to have kids. We don't have, very few of us ever go through parenting classes. And with the parenting classes, they teach you the kid's going to cry. And they're going to cry when they're happy. They're going to cry when they're sad. They're going to cry when they need to eat. They're going to cry because they eat. They're going to cry because they have gas. They're going to cry because they pass gas. There's all kinds of reasons they cry. And as this crying intensifies, usually through the first 6 to 8 weeks, a lot of injuries and a lot of people get frustrated and they think they have to be with the child 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, always there. But we need to let the families know that let's set that child down. Leave that room. Have that child laying on their back and let them cry a little bit. Step out of the room, figuratively or realistically. Take that deep breath. Gain control of yourself again. Call somebody, talk to them. No child has died for just sitting there crying. They get frustrated, upset, and everything, but they may be just as frustrated with you as you are with them. And we don't let parents know that. Then we have cases like this, where a 4-month little child comes in to see the doctor, and the doctor asks the parents, what caused these injuries on her chest? And at 4 months old, she shouldn't be, there's nothing there that she should be able to do to injure herself. So the parent said she scratched herself. The doctor, not thinking much about it, goes, okay. She was a little feverish, so they sent her home with some Tylenol and some stuff and didn't think much about it. A couple of weeks later, a week or so later, she was in another class with some doctors. I said, think about child development. Always think about the child development. And if you go to Google right now and you Google child development charts, you're going to see like a million different entries. They all pretty much have the same information in there. So you have to look at, is this child capable to do what the parents have described that they did? And in most cases, a child at 4 months old is not going to be able to scratch themselves. So she called the family back in and they cooperated. It's now like 2 weeks after that. And she said, I just want to do some further checks on your child to make sure they're okay. And the family said, okay, because they're not thinking anything at this time. They brought the child in and they did a chest X-ray. And now 14 to 21 days later, on that same child, they found 26 rib fractures. We need to understand that. What causes rib fractures in a child this age? It's squeezing. I'm talking, nothing is 100%, yes, but normally 95, 98% of the time you see squeezing going on like this, where you have broken ribs along the back spinal process or on the sides. It's from squeezing, usually in preparation to shaking. And this is not something you're going to see. That child was okay in those pictures. They may be fussy. They may be crying a little bit more, but then again, they may not, because they breathe different than adults. So we as adults and practitioners and investigators need to question. If the question comes up and the results of those questions come in that the child was okay, it was an accident, or it was something not intentional, fine. But if we don't start taking and looking at these cases like it's a criminal offense, like it's a homicide when they are deceased, then we will miss stuff. We will lose stuff. And the question, either the investigation will go unsolved or be drastically missing some of the items that we need for a successful prosecution. We always got to remember with society, speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil. They don't want to talk about it. You could go out into your local community and go to your local favorite restaurant and sit outside and start, hey, I want to talk to you about child deaths. I want to talk to you about child deaths. I want to talk to you about child deaths. And people are going to turn around and leave because nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to hear about it. The only time we hear about it on the news is when it's a drastic, major, bad case. And then, heck, we don't want to see it. Society really doesn't want to see it. We have to see it. We have to document. We have to take the photographs and look at what's going on. But nobody wants to see it. And society, if pressed on it, will turn away from it instead of having to watch what's going on. I talked to you about this, how much it takes to injure a child. And I'm going to show you a video. This video is very, very graphic. It's one that has been out there for a while, and many of you may have already seen it. But I'm going to show it again, and for two reasons. One is to make you upset, to make you think about what's going on. Not so much being upset, but to understand what's going on when these injuries and these actions are being taken against these kids. So let's watch the video. If you've seen it before and don't want to watch it, I understand. Those of you who haven't seen it, I'm going to ask a question at the end to help explain why I show this video. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, come back to where I can see you and ask a couple of questions and get some responses. All right. What do you think the injuries are that happened to this child? Check the chat here. Anybody can send a chat on it. Broken ribs. Very good, Patricia. Who else?
No injuries.
No injuries. Okay. Who said that?
Lana.
Lana. All right. And Alana, that's the correct answer, because what we think happened, and we see this, and we think subdural hematomas, retinal hemorrhages, ruptured spleen, lacerated liver, all those things that came in, broken ribs, all those bad things that could happen. And in this instance, this baby went through a beating. They were beaten, thrown, slammed down, out, eyes gouged out, and there were no injuries to this child. And the reason I show this video is to put that into perspective of when you do have a child that has metaphyseal lesions, lacerated liver, ruptured spleen, subdural hematomas, retinal hemorrhages, what did that child you're investigating for go through? This child was beaten. This child was beaten severely, and there were no injuries. So again, what did the child you're investigating for go through? Keep that in mind, because we won't overlook some things on this. And we know how violent these actions can be when these children are beaten. I'll try to go back to sharing. And continue. All right. Another deal we get that doesn't have those injuries that we look for is strangulation. And when we think of strangulation, everybody thinks of putting their hands around somebody's neck, impeding their normal breathing. Usually in strangulation, that's not the case. It's other parts of it, the impeding the circulation of the blood flow to and from the brain through the carotid artery and the jugular vein that slows or occludes that blood going in there. And we see this all the time in
So Jim, you're paused for me. I don't know about other folks. So everyone hang tight. Okay, Jim, I think you're unfrozen, but we all missed the last like 2 minutes of what you said. And now you're muted, so.
How about now?
You're great. That's good.
Okay, so I need to go back to, let's see. We finished the video, correct?
Yeah. And we've heard you discussing the video and sort of debriefing it. Yeah.
Okay, how about and we start off with strangulation? Did we get into that?
Yeah, go to strangulation. That sounds perfect.
All right, so I need to reshare my screen, or is it up?
Reshare your screen. It went away.
Okay, my connection went away to do that. There it is. But now.
Good.
All right. So when we talk about strangulation, we need to understand that this is one of those also activities that can seriously injure and kill a kid, and there not be any marks on the outside of their body. And we need to break down an understanding what the types of strangulation can be. First thing we talk about is impeding the normal breathing, which we normally think of the hands around the neck and choking somebody. And this is cutting off the airflow in and out of the body. And again, with children, we're not normally seeing these specific types of offenses. What we normally see is impeding the circulation of the blood to and from the head through the carotid artery and the jugular vein. And we see this quite often in MMA or UFC fighting, where this goes on and they really start fighting, but because they know if they don't do something quickly, they're unconscious. And it's 4 to 7 seconds, if done correctly or done with the right amount of pressure, you can render a person unconscious that quickly. So these fighters know either give up or they better fight real quick, because they're not going to get out of this. And the last one is blocking the mouth of a nose. And we see this in inflicted injuries or inflicted suffocation with the child, or accidental, where there's blocking, there's the rebreathing, where they have a towel over their face and they're not able to breathe the bad air out enough and breathe in enough good air to continue living, or they get rolled over on or cross, somebody lays a hand across their face where they're not being able to get that enough of the good air in. And we need to understand that babies don't breathe out of their mouth for the first 6 months of life. They're nose breathers. So if you block their nose, or the nose gets accidentally blocked, then they can't breathe and they end up dying from that also. So we have to understand that physiological aspects of what's going on with strangulation and what does it cost to strangle a kid. Quick question, is it possible to strangle someone to death in 4 minutes or less and not leave a mark? And that's yes. And it's really less than that, because they start dying in about 60 seconds when a complete lack of oxygen coming in or out to the brain in like 60 seconds. And it goes into the next study showing with your carotid artery occlusion, and all these facts that come from the Strangulation Institute out of California. There's one in the Midwest and there's one in Texas, but they've done all these studies with adults showing what it takes to render a person unconscious and the effects of strangulation. They have all kinds of information on strangulation and suffocation with adults, nothing on kids. Why? Because the kids that do survive are usually too young to talk about what happened. And then nobody's letting us go out and practice on their kids, which is a good practical reason for it not to. But the stuff that we've learned from adults is so phenomenal, so enlightening, and understanding the dangers of strangulation. Because all it takes is 11 pounds of pressure for 10 seconds on the carotid artery. And this just occludes it. It's not shutting off the blood flow, it's slowing it down. And if you take that 11 pounds of pressure for 10 seconds on the carotid artery, you can render a person unconscious in 10 seconds. And what is 11 pounds of pressure? Let's put it into perspective. It's half the amount of pressure it takes to open a soda can. We look at the general hands and strength of a person out there, and the average male has 110 to 120 pounds of pressure per hand. Average female, 60 to 80 pounds of pressure per hand. That's not including your arms, legs, and other parts of your body that could be involved in this, or rolling over and laying on the child with a compression factor so that the child is not able to breathe with all the pressure that is on their chest. And that can come with that compression part of it, with as little as putting a hand or an arm across them. You want to touch them while they're asleep. You want to make sure they're okay. But that pressure on their chest could limit the amount of air in and out of their lungs, then limiting the amount of air or oxygen that's making it to and from their brain after they breathe in or out. The other partner on this is the jugular vein. It's located right there by the carotid artery, a little bit further out, and it only takes 4.4 pounds of pressure for 10 seconds to render a person unconscious. So that's something to understand. And with putting the 4.4 pounds of pressure into conjunction to understanding, that's what it takes basically to do a trigger pull. Just at that little amount of pressure it takes to fire a gun can be enough to kill a kid or an adult in this manner. So every day, 4 to 8 children in the US die from abuse or neglect at the hands of their parents or caretakers. 4 to 8 doesn't sound much. You say 4 to 8, multiply it by 7, then multiply it by 52 weeks in a year. You've got a lot of kids dying. No one knows the exact number because sometimes we don't do proper investigations. So that exact number is nebulous out there. There's been little progress in preventing these tragic crimes. And most of the children who die are infants and toddlers. And a lot of those come from those suffocation. If you look at the top 10 most common forms of child death that are inflicted, you've got strangulation is in the top 3 of the top 5. So we have to understand what's going on. Most of these happen with accidental strangulations. and we have to get out there again, is understand this when we go in for our investigations. But our medical people and people in the CACs and conducting child parenting classes and everything need to explain what it goes on with helping a kid and not letting them die from this. So you've got, we talked a lot about sleep on the back, keep them on the back. The country of Finland has done extensive studies, educational projects to educate the people that come through the hospitals in Finland. When the baby is born, you teach them to sleep on the back. Every time they go to sleep, they sleep on their back. You don't have a lot of toys. You don't have a lot of stuff in the crib. In fact, Finland has gone as far as giving them a box about the size of a dresser, and it has a small pad. And the only thing that has in it with that pad is you put a blanket. And every time that child goes to sleep, they go to sleep on their back in this box. If they found anywhere else, they put them on their back in the box. And guess what? SIDS, or better name for it, SUID, sudden unexplained infant death, is basically gone away. There are many studies out there showing that what we thought was SIDS or SUID is actually some kind of suffocation or strangulation event. I'm not saying all of them are criminal, but they all take a serious investigative look from law enforcement, from child protective services, from other entities that are involved in this, and have the body have that autopsy done and everything, and how important that autopsy can be. But with the autopsy, it comes in, poop out. If you don't do a good investigation and look at all the possibilities and follow your different hypotheses based on the evidence, not on your feelings, then we'll get more of these cleared up, and we're going to find out there's a lot less SUID or SIDS out there than what we were thinking. And in the US is starting more training on this back to the back and baby in a box and those kind of things also. So you may have seen some of this. It's been a few years, but it seems to be slow in the process through the United States. So at-risk children, social isolation. We think that we have to be with our kids, and we socially isolate ourselves. We keep people away. We build those barriers, and some of it is social economics. We can't get out. Some of it is our culturalism. Some of it is our racial and ethnic background, and sometimes we just don't know people to go to, and so we now have this child, and we need to keep them safe and cuddled in their own little space. But that social isolationism, it brings out that where we don't ask, and we try to take care of everything ourselves. And we always get to the old saying of it takes a village to raise a child is so appropriate. And even in today's society, it's not just the parents. We see less of grandparents and aunts and uncles and the family in there, and parents are just isolating themselves and being the only person exposed to the child, unless they're going to daycare or to a babysitter or something. So we just keep them in there, and we suffer through what's going on with the children. I don't know what is the appropriate age to have a kid. I was 25 before I had that experience and everything. And I still don't think I was prepared. You've been through parenting classes, and it's a constant trial and error basis to learn how to take care of kids. But we have so many young or single young parents out there trying to take care of the kids. It's difficult with multiple partners taking care of the kids, let alone having that one person in there that barely knows how to take care of themselves, now having to raise a child or children. Mental health issues, can't get into that enough, and talking about all the different mental health problems going on out there. And as I was told through some training, that crazy parents raise crazy kids, and they do crazy things, and nothing is quote unquote normal for them. So we always have to take this into issue. A lot of times as us cops go in there, we overlook the mental health, but that's where working with CPS, working with your CACs and mental health professionals can help you understand different aspects are going along with the case. And drugs. I know the drug abuse around here is meth, coke, a bunch of others according to where you are in there. And as rural as a lot of Idaho is, I'm sure meth is a big problem up there. And we have special laws. If meth is involved, boom, there's already a case against them and everything. But it does not have to be just meth. Any kind of substance abuse that takes the parent away from being able to take care of their child. Alcohol to a certain extent, anything that they take into their body. And then when you're in these higher states of not being able to control yourself and everything, then you do things. And we've seen things done to kids just because they were high, that the torture and stuff that goes on involved in it. So always look for at your scenes, were other substances involved? Domestic violence. There's a new study out, I don't know how new, it's a couple of years old, that show that children that are subjected to seeing and being around domestic violence incidents have higher issues of mental illness later in life than those that are direct victims of child abuse. So we have to look at this domestic violence, and we could spend days just talking about the issues that go on with domestic violence and some of those societal beliefs of why people stay and what should be going on and why didn't they leave and blah, 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 all those misconceptions about what's going on. And one of the big ones that we have in here is we start blaming the victim of domestic violence instead of the person that's perpetrating the domestic violence. They are the most likely the person that is doing something to the child, unless the non-offending parent or the non-victimized parent in abuse is doing something to the child to keep them quiet so that they don't interrupt or disturb the person committing the domestic violence, so that they don't turn on them. So there's all kinds of issues. And again, we can spend days talking about domestic violence issues and kids that are involved or around these domestic violence issues. Again, it goes back to some of the first things I said, lack of skills. We don't teach parents to be parents. We don't go in there and show them how to change a diaper and all those different areas and creases and folds that we have to get feces and other material out of. We don't train our parents that when you first start changing the diaper on that little boy, you better hold the penis down, because if not, he's going to pee in your face. And people get upset at the child for doing this when it's just a natural reaction of the cold air or something coming across them that they can't control when they're going to urinate or when they're going to do something like that. And then people become angry and take their anger out on the child. I had one case we worked where the offender would come in and say, my 6-month-old child was looking at me in a mean way. So I had to teach him not to look at me in a mean way. Crying comes back to that. My son shouldn't cry, so I had to beat him to stop him from crying. Those kind of excuses that come up in it. Poverty increases stress. I'm not going to say people without money injure their kids more than others, but people under stress will injure their children more. And we are in a high stress time with the COVID issues and everything else that's going along in society today. And I think we'll be seeing the effects of these COVID issues for years to come, and our domestic violence and our child abuse that's being committed, and there's no way to make their outcries to talk about it. Other at risk, 72% of child maltreatment involve, fatalities involve a prior neglect, either alone or with another maltreatment, often in families suffering that stress. And we're also seeing up in the upper middle 70s of children that have had a prior CPS history have a greater chance of being killed. Not always intentionally, but they are already having problems in their neglect and their attention to the children. So those people are more likely to be the ones to injure their child to the point of them dying. Unrelated adults, again, that's a common issue we're seeing today. Mom has new boyfriend, mom has new husband that's not the father of that child. And so there's not that tie. And those that have the biological connection with the child seem to be less likely to injure their child to the point of death, but we can't rule those out. Again, 65 to 85% of all the child fatalities that happen in their own home. And we need to look at what's going on there to see the reasoning behind what is happening. Again, it's the prior CPS report is the biggest predictor. 2.45 times the risk of injury death, 5.8 times the risk of unintentional injury death, and 3.5 times the risk of sleep-related death. And that sleep-related death comes into teaching those parents not to sleep with their kids. And I'm guilty of it. I've had my kids at a young age because I didn't want to get up and go back and forth, to the crib and everything. I was lazy at the time. So you bring the kid in to sleep with them. There's a greater chance, 3.5 times greater chance that that child is going to die if they're sleeping with their parents. And law enforcement that are out there, this is important to have your CPS, your Child Protective Services people involved with your cases because they've probably been out to the home before. They can show you pictures of what has happened in that home or what that house was like before. Have there been cleaning issues there before? Pardon me a second. And I'm big on having CPS and law enforcement work these cases together jointly, being part of it, sharing the information, open sharing of information to the point of CPS says, hey, I need a copy of your report. Here it is. Here's my recordings. Here's all the pictures I take. We give our case to CPS. CPS gives their case to us. So that our team working for the same goals. Law enforcement working for the prosecution. If there's a criminal case, CPS looking into the fact that do these parents need to keep these kids, this total long-term safety issues with these children. So leading into that, we're going to talk about teamed investigations and the MDT. The multidisciplinary team, common members, law enforcement, right? We've got to be there because if there's a criminal investigation that needs to be part of it, we have to be there. We have to be open to what's going on. Law enforcement, your first call, hey, I've got a child death, or I've got a suspicion or a serious injury that could lead to death. First call CPS, get them involved in it because there's certain issues that they can take care of that we can't take care of. So get those in there. Those are the two biggest cogs dealing with this in the initial part of it is finding out what's happening, what's going on with it. Our child care licensing, if you have child care licensing in your state, who governs daycares and babysitters and looks into those issues with it. And we've got to have a good working relationship with our prosecutors, district attorney, state's attorney, who's going to be prosecuting this. And they've got to be, I got to have an open line to be able to call and talk to the different ones about what's going to be happening. You may not have a specific child abuse prosecutor there. So you've got to know that prosecutor. And if there's going to be anything different out of the quote unquote normal things that you see, sometimes education has to happen. Education has to happen with the law enforcement and with the district attorney so that you're all on the same page looking at this and recognizing what is going on with these cases. Medical personnel, especially your child abuse certified pediatricians, if the child has not died or is seriously injured and is probably going to die, because you're not going to have that ME in there right off. But you're going to have a doctor, you're going to have nurses in there that are watching, observing, and taking care of these kids. And do they recognize abusive situations? I know with Dr. Cox and his staff and the other doctors over there with him, if you have a suspicious case, You can get that to them. They can review things and let you know what's going on with it. If you didn't have an autopsy done, maybe they can go back and look at this stuff. The medical personnel and the hospital staff, including your paramedics that arrive at the scene, that do the snatch and grab on the baby to get them there to the hospital quickly. We need to go back and interview these. And these were these interviews. We slow down, take a figurative deep breath, and what do I need to do next? And we need to understand how medical personnel work in these situations. The paramedics are going to ask what happened. They get to the hospital, they're going to ask, the intake nurse or person is going to say, what happened? The triage nurse is going to say, what happened? The nurse, when they come in, what happened? The doctor comes in and says, what happened? The radiologist comes in and asks, what happened? Anybody that comes in asks what happened. They put in their notes, this is what they told me it happened. Are you getting the same story? So if the hospital staff is already doing this, this can help us build our clues, help with our hypothesis, help us understanding what was going on with the child. Medical examiner, again, if you don't go to the autopsies, I strongly suggest you change that and go to the autopsies. CPS, Child Protective Services, if you've never been to the autopsy, ask. There's no reason for you not, unless there's a policy or procedures in your state, for you not to go see these autopsies. Sit there with the cops, ask questions. Medical examiners are usually different kinds of people. They're not always up on being a human. And you're there, and this is the first person they've had to talk to in a while, and they will talk to you about what's going on as much as they can. You may get more information out of talking to them than what they're putting in their reports. Mental health, and this goes with the child advocates. Who sees these kids after? We've done our forensic interview on the surviving children. We've done talking to the family for our initial part or our investigation. And now we're ready to file our case, or we're looking at for holes in our case. Well, who's talking to the family, the surviving children and other members, the non-offending caregivers? Who's talking to these people? Your child advocates and your healthcare professionals. And they're probably going to be working them well after the trial goes on. So what's going on? We need to have these people involved in our multidisciplinary team so that they understand what has been told. So if they're told something different, maybe they can come forward with you with other information. And any other professionals as you need. Maybe you want to bring in a child's teacher, daycare worker, somebody else that was involved in it that has some kind of insight that can help you with the case. Again, we have all these major areas, the medical examiner, CPS, law enforcement, child care licensing, all there for the child. Don't ever forget on your investigation, it's not there to catch the bad guy. It's not there for, dehumanizing people and everything. It's there, a child has been seriously injured or dead, and we have to find out why. So remember, you're the voice of that child from the crime scene and from your investigation. So keep that in mind. It's not about you. It's all for the child. The value of your team, make your job easier. If CPS is going out there and they're already having to talk to different parts of the family, let them do the initial talk on the family. Now, when it comes to talking to the person that's designated as the offender, the suspect, the perpetrator, that needs to be done by law enforcement, because the greater level of proof, the more experience in dealing with these. And it's one of those deals that in the long term, law enforcement is better suited to doing this interrogation or very suspect interview, whatever you want to call it. But have CPS there with you. They can sit in the other room. I'm big on one person interrogations. I'm the only person in the room talking to the suspect at the time. My buddy, the partner, or CPS or whoever else is in another room watching it, they're the ones taking notes, because that comes down to the fact that a person is more likely going to tell you a secret when it's just you, not having other people in there. And you don't know how that other person is going to react if you say something off the wall. Like, you never know what's going to come out of my mouth. So take that, work with it. But if there's a bunch of stuff going on, divvy out some of that work. Make it easier on everybody. Make it less work. Your product is going to be stronger on the civil and criminal side if you cooperate in these cases. You have that preponderance of evidence, and bringing a law enforcement in on your civil case, tell them, yeah, we're working a criminal case, and this is what we found in the criminal case, can go a long way to swaying that judge or that jury into making sure that child is not giving back to that family, or could have contact with that perpetrator. And then bringing CPS in on your criminal case adds that strength to the criminal case. It's not just the cop showing what happened. Now you have the cop showing what happened. You have CPS saying the same thing. You have forensic interviewers bringing that stuff in from the other children involved. You have the medical team coming in talking about it and what's happening with it. And they can bring great expertise. If you can get a paramedic or a fireman to come in, it looks good on your case. Less trauma. And I'm big on talking about vicarious trauma. We have to take care of ourselves. We're going to see so much caca, so much feces out there dealing with child abuse, child death, child sexual assaults, that vicarious trauma builds up. And having a team, having somebody to go through it with you, having somebody to talk to about what has happened, is a great way of taking care of yourself, so that the other thing that happens in our profession, the suicides and all that stuff, can be minimized and hopefully taken out of the situation. Stronger partnerships, lessens defense's ability to prove it out, that you have more and more people coming in from different points of the investigation saying the same thing happened. Better overall protection for the child and the rest of the family, the surviving members of the child. All right, let's get into the scene. We're going to have EMS, and I'm big on making fun of EMS, our paramedics, our first responding medical people to get there, because we joke and say they are the ultimate destroyers of our crime scene, and they are, but they're not there to destroy our crime scene. That is not their intent. Their intent is to get there and to save the kid. And I know our paramedics have the philosophy: if they're not green and their head's still attached, they're going to snatch and grab and take them to the hospital. That's okay, because that is their job, to do the most they can for helping this child survive. And if you talk to them, catch them as they come in, hey, this might be a crime scene. Hey, there's something going on fishy about this. They're going to do less, but you still got to let them do their job. They're going to leave it like a tornado has come through or a hurricane has come through, and they're going to leave their mess all over the place and be gone. But they can be a great asset to helping your case. So then you get there, they are working on the kid. What is your responsibility? This is where you got to stay calm. Injured child, children that are not breathing, children that are not are having seizures and aren't right, tends to excite all of us. We want to jump in and help, but if they're being helped, as an investigator, our job is now to step back, take a deep breath, assess. What am I seeing? Not just with the child, but around the house. What am I hearing? What are the other people in the house? What are they talking about? I'm smelling. What do I smell? Do I smell vomit? Do I smell blood? Do I smell baby formula? What is going on? How does this fit in? What are you feeling? What is the temperature of the room? What is there anything else in there that draws you? And hopefully you never have to go into one of those crime scenes that you taste, where it's so bad and it's so strong that your taste buds are affected by this. But you're analyzing and starting to develop your hypothesis on what happened. Control, assess, step by step. You know how to do these investigations. You know how to investigate. Don't be thrown off because of the child that's in it now. How do you handle those family members? Why are you here? Why is there a cop here? My kid was just unconscious. And calming them down and not being that guy that's, oh, I'm in charge. How would you feel if your child was seriously injured or unconscious and all of a sudden the cops are there asking a bunch of questions? One way I deal with it is, think about it. Sir, I understand something happened to your child. I need you to talk to me about the accident that caused these injuries. Minimize a little bit. Bring it down. Slow it down. I'm not blaming anybody. There was an accident. Then you go to the doctor. Hey, he told me this happened. Well, that couldn't have caused it. So you go jump down his throat? No. Sir, I must have been misunderstood you. You told me about an accident where your child was injured. Well, that accident could not have caused these injuries. Tell me about the accident that caused these injuries. Try to be their friend. Try to be empathetic. Try to place yourself in there, because the person you talk to may not be the offender. That you may think they are, but they may not be. So you don't want to rule them out or push them away from the investigation before you ever have a chance to really get started. Note the scene at the hospital. I told you what to do with the medical staff. I tell you, you get there and the nurses think something has happened to this kid. This kid has been seriously injured. They're going to give you as much as they can. You need a room. You still need to separate and talk to the people. You may not go into that thorough investigation, getting all the details right then, but you want to try to lock into a story. You want to try to get them into that. Take them away from the child into another room. Have them take a deep breath, get them something to drink, and start talking to them. Note the scene at the hospital, because a lot of times these did not happen at the hospital. The child was just brought there. So what do you see here, and where do you need to start to go looking? Who's there? Talk about that angry dad. How are you going to handle that angry dad? The distraught mother, the other kids that could be there, the multi-generational houses. Now you have aunts, uncles, grandparents that are showing up. And the kids and the grandparents and the other people living there know what's going on. And they are going to have to be talked to. Children taken to a CAC, or who does your forensic interviews, and have those forensic interviews done by somebody that's trained to do the forensic interviews. Bring those other family members in and run them through the interview process too. Lock in that story. What else have they seen going on? Again, it doesn't have to be grandma and grandpa. It can be aunts, uncles, and everything else. They could be. And understand, a lot of families will cover for other family members. They know the family member did something wrong. But until the seriousness of what has happened to this child can be brought to the forefront, they're still going to sit there and protect their sister and protect their brothers and other people there so that they don't get in trouble. And unfortunately, there's a lot of thinking in here. You can always get another kid. They don't always think about that kid at the time because, it's okay. I can get another one later. Where did it occur? Was it at a house, an apartment, a not so special dwelling, what we nickname around here tornado traps, mobile homes, motorhomes? Doesn't matter where you're from in these situations. It's still a child that's been involved in it. Still a child, and people in that home cared just as much for that child as any of the others. We just need to find out where it started so that we can begin our investigation there. How did they get there? Did they leave the home? Were they transported by a paramedic in an ambulance? Great. You need to talk to those paramedics. You need to get their run sheets. You need to start looking at all the things that they may have heard or were told while they were there. Understand, a lot of times they're on different schedules. So the sooner you can get in there and find them and talk to them, the better off you will be. A lot of times with run sheets or paperwork they did or actual medical treatment that was done, you have to think about HIPAA. Even though HIPAA does not apply to child abuse and domestic violence when law enforcement is involved, everybody will say, hey, I need that piece of paper to release this information. It's better off just to go get your grand jury subpoena, search warrant, whatever you need to get those records. Or better yet, have CPS involved, because CPS usually has that form available where the parents sign for records release. And if they get the release, they can give you that information, and vice versa. If they came in their own car, and check the car out. It doesn't mean you want to get in there and just open it up and start tearing it apart, but you can walk by the car. You know, they have these great modern inventions on the outside called windows that you can go in and look and check out what is in there. And if you see something, you may want to go back, law enforcement, and get that search warrant and get into it in more detail. You see a bloody rag or something else in there, that gives you a chance to secure it. CPS, if you're going out there and seeing the car, the parents may be wanting to follow you to where you're going to take them next for an interview. Then get them out there, take them, but make sure you check out that car before you just let them into it. Who have they talked to? Always narrow it back to the person that had the 5 senses to be your best witness. You know, hey, Uncle Bobby did it. How do you know Uncle Bobby did it? Aunt Mary told me. Okay, now I keep that from the first one, but now I go find Aunt Mary. I want to get my witness back to who saw, heard, felt, smelt, or tasted the incident as it was going on. Then who called 911? Get that 911 call located, locked in, and recorded, because people aren't thinking about excuses at this time, and more information can come out on that 911 call than, you know, that may come out later. And it's something you can go back and question people on. Well, on the 911 call, you said this. Understand, 911 calls aren't kept forever. CPS, you have a right to listen to that 911 call also. So get it from your police officers and let them know what's going on with it. Ask for it. If there's a reason, there may be a reason they don't let you have it at that time, but maybe you can listen to it and narrow that down. It may take an Open Records Act or whatever goes on in Idaho for you to be able to get this. But again, if you're working the cases like you should be and sharing this information that you find out on your cases, here it is. Give it to them. Let it go in. And hear the emotions and everything that were going on. Are they now calling their son Bobby it, or, you know, that child, using those non-personal identifiers? Child found dead at home. We always have that oh, it's a SUID or a SIDS. That's later determined. We do a good, thorough crime scene follow-up investigation, and we've ruled everything else out. That's when you get to SUID and SIDS. You're not going to go in there, oh, this is a SUID. Oh, this is a SIDS. No. You go in thinking it's a homicide. Somebody killed this kid intentionally, and then work from that point. Don't just assume and have your first responders go in and assume, oh, we don't have anything here, it must have been a SIDS. No. Again, more and more of this is turned over and showing that it is a strangulation suffocation type event than just an unexplained death. Get that time of death issues. Who was the last person to see them alive? When were they found deceased? How much time is going on between? Because even, you know, we think, oh, we're going to get that time of death. Time of death was last seen alive, last breath. So if you're sitting there and you watch the child die, then you've got that understanding the child died right then. But anything else, we have a time frame we have to look at. What was the child sleeping in? Were they in one of these big old cribs with a lot of other stuff, sheets, toys that they could have suffocated with? Or are they in that box with just that blanket? Are they sleeping on their stomach? Are they sleeping on their back or on their side? And as they get older, we can't control a lot of this, so we have to keep that in mind also. You know, crib, note the scene. Always treat it as a crime scene. CPS, you're there. Think of it that a crime could be, have been committed. If you don't know what to do, stop, put your hands in the pocket, and don't move. but you're going to have to be looking up. Look at the ceiling, because, you know, in a shaken baby situation, they could have been shaken to where they thrown up, and vomit could be on the ceiling. And the people don't think about cleaning that. They look at eye level and down to do the cleaning and stuff. So make sure you get in there and look around the whole scene and treat it as a crime scene, or a crime has happened in that scene you're at. I get a lot of CPS workers tell me, we don't go to crime scenes. Well, if you've ever been to a place where a child has been injured, sexually abused, or died, you could be in a crime scene. How was the child found? Who found? Where? Conditions are all important issues that go into what you're looking at. You know, the person that found them may not have been the person that did something to them, but locking it in, because a lot of times with shaken baby type of situations, they become symptomatic immediately. Who was with them? Build that timeline up. I like going back a week before. What were they wearing? What were they doing? What was normal? When they became symptomatic, who was with them at that time? Bruises. So we're going to look at some common injuries that we see in death cases. The great thing about the medical community, they've come out with this systematic look at an injury analysis. They call it 10-4. I think they did it for us darn cops and people that we would understand it a little bit more. But any injury on the torso, that's the T in the 10, in the chest, the back, the buttocks, the hips, the genitals, you know, all of those are suspicious. Those aren't normally bruised, and it should mean we need to ask more questions. The ears are mostly cartilage. So if you have bruising on the ears, there's not a lot of vascularity that can show these bruises and stuff. And it almost takes enough pressure to pull off an ear as to bruise it. So keep that in mind. That's a serious pinching or a compression issue on the ears. The neck, we talked about the neck in that there's not a lot of stuff there. There's not a lot of pressure. So if there's bruising on the neck, that is always suspicious. And that's where we get our T, E, and N in our 10-4. And the 4 is under 4 months. And we look at it this way. In most child development charts and discussions, children don't even start rolling over until 3, 4, or 5 months. And if they can't even roll over, then how are they hurting themselves? So anything in this 10-4 category is something to be looked at. Again, indicators are just that, meaning that needs to be checked out, and nothing is 100%. Oh, they've got this, they were abused. Even when you get up and talking about metaphyseal lesions and broken ribs, they're highly specified for these incidents, but nothing is 100%. Dealing with burns, the great thing about burns is that most of them now are accidental, you know, but these immersion sock or glove burns tend to be intentional. So we look for specific things. We look for straight lines. You look at the feet on the right, you see the straight line at the top. You see uniform depth of injury. You also see uniform the injury all looks the same across. There's not specified areas. And if you look at the feet, the soles of the feet, they weren't burned. So when you're seeing straight lines don't happen in nature. Uniform depth of injury and sparing, we can look for those intentional type injuries. The spill burns are usually accidental, result from spilling something on them. You know, I know Dr. Cox, I stole this from him, called it the killer ramen, when you fed them ramen or you fed them soup and they spill it all over themselves. In this, you see the flow patterns. There are no straight lines. The injuries are all different as they go through there. And they're sparing. There's no sparing because it happens so much of the time. A study that came out in APSAC in 2016 showed that only up to 8 to 10% of burns are intentional. So they can be caused by a multitude of different things, but we need to look at straight lines, or if it's a contact burn, do we see the item? Do we see the iron, or do we see the burners on the stove that go in there? So if we're seeing items, because most accidental stuff happens with a smear, a movement on it. But now with these contact intentional burns, you're seeing the item because they're being pressed in there. So what we look for, straight lines, uniform depth of injury, and sparing, where the folds are going up or where the child clenched and the hot water didn't get in there, or the soles of the feet where they were in contact with the surface of the tub where it did not get hot enough. This is a great chart. Talks about how much does it take and what does it take to burn. And this is based on adults again. Okay. So most of us took a hot shower this morning. It's about 94 degrees. A hot tub runs between 104, 107 degrees. And we think that's hot. At 120, it's going to be so painful that you don't want to be in it. You wouldn't sit in it. You wouldn't stay in it. And up to 158, 160 degrees, it's an almost instantaneous 3rd degree burn. That's well below boiling point. Boiling point is 212 degrees. So we want to keep that down. Understand that. It does not have to be boiling water that can cause these injuries on a child. Breaks, you know, we talk about specificity for, so we look at talking about the breaks. The first one I want to talk about is that linear skull fracture. That small skull fracture, usually on the back side of the skull, that does not cross suture lines. Suture lines are the separation in the skull when a child is born, and they fuse together. The soft spot goes away in the top and in the back. But if it's a simple linear skull fracture that does not cross suture lines, that does not have a witness to show specific assaultive actions were taken, then they're probably not going to look at this as a child abuse situation. I had a 10-year-old kick another 10-year-old in the head with a soccer ball, and he got a skull fracture from it. So linear skull fractures can happen to adults, kids, simple things, drop, fall, many things can cause it. So that they won't look at that alone as a high indicator for an abusive event. Though we get on the high specificity side of it, you got your classic metaphyseal lesions, the soft bony areas of the elbow, the shoulder, the knee, and the hips. They become separated from the hard bone under high levels of stress and pressure, severe shaking, pulling, jerking motions. The best thing going into this, if the doctor comes out and says they have metaphyseal lesions, okay, were they in a car crash? Were they in a plane crash? Then you look at the jerking, shaking, and pulling actions on it. A little bit more about rib fractures, especially along the back. Those are symptoms and have a high specificity for squeezing, usually in preparation of shaking. So it's something we always need to hold in and keep in mind when we're looking at these. Moderate, if they have a bunch of fractures, different ages of fractures. You digital fractures where you've got the multiple finger fractures in there. Those are have a moderate specificity for, and usually if there has to be a specific understanding, and they should be able to tell you how each one of them happened. Quick hit on photography. Right now, if you don't take pictures, don't expect to win a case. Doesn't matter what kind of case is going on. If there's injuries and you're describing something, you need to be taking pictures of it. You are in control of this aspect of it. You can go out and show what's there, measurements, everything else, and bring that in there so that everybody can look at and be part of it. And it's great. You know, for your prosecutors out there, you can go along with me on this. It's a change in the juries when they see a picture. It's like, oh yeah, I've been listening to lawyers for 2 or 3 hours, and now a picture's brought in, they become energized, and it makes you more of a truth teller. You know, the judges and the juries, they see all these cop shows out there. They see all these things that we can do. Well, they expect to see something. If you don't know pictures, all right, no case. So you better be taking pictures in this, and you better be doing it in a good professional manner with it. Because if they can't see something to overcome all this stuff that they see on TV, even though most of it is made up, we have to have something there to show, to make us more of a truth teller. Our prosecutors are always going to be asking for stuff. Give me something. What can you always give them? You can always give them photographs. You can always give them a scene diagram. You can always sit down and make up a timeline. All these different things, body diagrams, all these different items that they can now take and show and tell with the jury becomes so important with making that jury believe you more. Again, you need to start off with your overall picture. With a person, it's showing the whole person. With the room, it's several different angles of the room, from the door, each corner, from the center out. You're just showing that overall look of what's going on. You get medium, you get closer in on the person, focusing a little bit on the injuries in the room. You're showing more of the items that are evidence. You get a close-up. I want to see the injury. Each one of them should have unless they're really close together, should have their own picture. And then you need to have a size standard, something in there, preferably that ABFO, that L-shaped ruler would be involved, but any straight edge with markings on it are great to show size standards, because pictures don't show distances, actual size, or anything like that, unless you have something in there to show it. And I will say again, don't use your body parts, don't use your shoes or anything like that. Make sure it's something of standard size.
Jim, I just wanted to give you a time cue. We're coming up on a few minutes left. I know that you got started a few minutes early, so I think it's probably okay to go over.
Right. Yeah, we've got 8 slides left.
Okay, great.
No, 13 slides left. We're good. All right. So they got to be material. You're going to show what you have. They got to be relevant. This is what we had at the crime scene. They're relevant because this shows what we're trying to point out in there. It's where it gets to be the professional. We start getting into some skills, but most of us are using cameras, iPhones, or whatever that have that automatic setting, which gets you into everything that you really need. Got to be accurate. That means you're going to have to show measurements. We're not going to distort the pictures to have them show anything. And if you take a fuzzy picture, leave that fuzzy picture in there. If you have picture 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7, everybody's going to say, what happened to what happened to photo 4? Photo 4, could have been important, but if you're human and you made a mistake, leave your mistakes there. You're going to have to be own up to it, and it's okay, because we're all human. And then if it's inflammatory, I'm going to take a picture of the crime scene. If the judge says that's inflammatory or that's not good, let them be the ones. I'm not going to cut out taking pictures because, ooh, that's some gross looking stuff. No, that's what was there. Do a sketch, keep your personal notes, base your notes on your 5 senses. It's proven more and more. And we've got into, with child interviews, the sensory details are what humanizes you and your victims. So when you're taking your notes, keep it in there. You may not taste anything out there. You may not have that one sense in it, but there's going to be stuff you smell, feel, hear, see. How does it fit in? Have a sketch, an overall view of what you saw at your scene. Photographs. You got to have photographs. There's no such thing as too many. We pulled a child out of a porta potty. We had 450 pictures of the porta potty. All right. Don't be afraid to take pictures. We're not having to pay for film anymore. We're not having to pay for a lot of those other services. It's just the storage for the photographs. Don't shortchange your case or you by cutting out photographs. Have that scene diagram, your impression on what was there. Water temperatures, if they're involved in any burns. Lock that witness into a story, whether you believe in polygraphs or not. Maybe get them on the box, run them through that polygraph. It's a great way to help rule people in, rule people out. Focus on the timeline. Does the story fit? It does not have to be a drawn out, intense one. You can just have a simple line with lines across it, where little dots going across it, where people were at that certain time, who was with the child when they became symptomatic. Okay. How were they before and how were they after? So I, like you said, again, I'll start a week before. How were they normal? Were they reaching up with both hands? Were they able to watch you with both eyes? What was going on? What was happening afterwards? Or was there a delay in the calling of help, medical help? So I'm going to end this one really quickly by a tool that's out there. Some of you may have heard about it, some of you may not, but it's for all smartphones. It's called the Child Protector app. It's an investigative and educational tool that you can have in there. I say download it as soon as you can, because it'll start answering questions and helping you with it. When you download it, the symbol you'll see is this purple diagram up here, or drawing, is what the identifier for the Child Protective app. It was started in Texas, and another doctor in Kansas worked on this together. It was originally made for the medical community. That's why you see in Missouri and Texas are the only places that are based on the state laws. So it just helps you work into it a little bit better. It goes in and it'll show, you pick out internal injuries or other injuries in there, and you just pick out which ones you want to be looking at the time. What type of injury do I have in it? You also get into a little more detail on it, and it helps with your decision tree. So you pick on one, and it'll take you into asking questions. Ask the doctor, what did I have? What did I not have? And start, if you don't know the answer to these, go ask. It has explanations on what retinal hemorrhages are that you can see and understand. But this is going in and understanding the questioning of what's going on. What time? It also gets into explanations.
The following section details fractures frequently encountered in child abuse investigations. Some people may presume that inflicted fractures frequently have bruises associated with them. However, it is now known that it is uncommon to find bruising near any inflicted fracture.
So you have these video explanations that you can send to other officers, other investigators, other people to look at. And again, it talks about those explanations on more serious stuff. And this one, it talks about perforations of the abdomen and the bowels. Once you finish, you will get a chart, a tree on there that shows how likely it is to be an abusive event or not, and then it has things to follow up with. One, it's in both of them. Take pictures, take pictures, take pictures. If you have a doctor that's not familiar with abusive situation, you can take this to him and says, look, doc, this was made by doctors, and it's asking, can we do these other steps and everything? And it goes on into other medical treatments or studies or things to look at. So we finish this up. It has, your child history and child development. It has a lot of that information in there also that you can go through and look. Who did you talk to? When did you talk to them? And it can help you with your investigation. So if you're leaving stuff out, this app can help you look for that kind of information. It's free. Use it, share it, get it out to everybody. You can find it in your app stores for either one of you if you use Apple or an Android type phone. All right, we've reached the end of the PowerPoint. Here's my information if you want to talk to me more. You can call me, email me, whatever you need, text me. If you have I'd rather help you with the case and get it going in the right direction than somebody else will look at it later and, oh no, what did we do wrong? Understand, I will tell you this, the next perfect case I do will be the first perfect case I do. There are going to be stuff that you're not going to have answers for or that you did not know to get at that time. Most of these can be recovered and worked on, but you've got the more help you can get to help you at the beginning, the better off you will be. So I'm going to stop taking and put it out there. Does anybody have any questions?
If folks have questions, you can unmute yourself or feel free to drop it in the chat.
I can pull the chat up here. Nobody? Again, you have my phone number, you have my email. You know, use me, abuse me, whatever you need to do to help get the right information to help those kids you're working for. I'm talking to a few other people, maybe getting to come back to Idaho here in a few months. And hopefully can meet some of y'all and we can talk about some of the things that you're seeing with cases, and we can get a better understanding and move in the right direction to make sure the kids of Idaho are taken care of.
Thanks so much, Jim. Everyone else, I've sent a link to the closing session in the chat if you want to click on that and hop over in the closing session. But thanks again so much, Jim.
All right. See y'all later. Nice talking to y'all. See you later, Emily.